Thank you, Mika-san, for joining in this conversation.
Thank you very
May I-
much for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background? I mean, basically for on camera, what you've been doing and what you currently do, and then probably we can get into the questions.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my name is Mika Fukutomi, and I'm joining this call from Japan. And I have a background in international finance and law. And I'm also the founder and CEO of a business called Akamira Inc. And the reason I created this organization is to facilitate global capital's access to Japan's SME market, because I recognize that there's a really serious SME succession problem. And I want Japanese SMEs to gain more visibility within the global capital markets.
Right. So, Japan's SME sector, I mean, you mentioned about Akamira there. So,
Mhm.
Japan's SME sector is often described as the backbone of the economy. I mean, I guess that's true for most countries in a sense. So, how would you characterize its current state? I mean, particularly the context of aging ownership, succession challenges. From your perspective, how urgent is the situation? I mean, is it time to
Yes,
call the fire tenders? I mean, is it ablaze in that sense?
I absolutely agree that SMEs form the backbone of the Japanese economy. Something like 99% of Japanese companies are SMEs. And that there is this problem with the aging population. And, some statistics say like 1.27 million SMEs have owners who are over 70 years of age, and they don't have successors yet. So, yes, it is an urgent issue. Every day we have viable businesses that are closing because of lack of successors. Yeah. And so that's the problem I'm trying to solve for.
Yeah. So, how do you basically kind of address this problem at scale? How will the system do that?
I often say that it's not a capital problem, but it's sort of more of an access and infrastructure problem. There's plenty of capital and interest in Japan. But from the global investor's perspective, I think it's, still quite difficult to find, identify Japanese SMEs that are looking for successors. So our solution is to give more visibility to Japanese SMEs.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you touched upon the aspect of lack. I mean, the issue is not lack of capital, but in practical terms, for global investors looking at Japan's private markets, how does this kind of, how do you kind of represent it in a simplified manner?
I think currently there's a lack of transparency. If someone's looking for a Japan listed company, there's plenty of information out there. But when it comes to the private markets, it's very difficult to identify companies, I think. And one of the problems is language, simply. Because most things in Japan tend to still be in Japanese, and despite machine translation and so forth, it's very difficult to discover opportunities. And I think beyond discovery, I think it's a question of filtering information, and really finding something that matches your needs or your requirements.
So, I mean, on that aspect of lack of transparency, I mean, I guess that's what you're trying to do at Akamira. I mean, basically, kind of building infrastructure for a segment which is has been traditionally very opaque. So, how have you been going about doing that? I mean, and how does data and technology, kind of change in the way this whole succession and mergers are approached in Japan?
Yes. So the first thing I did was I created a database. I'm calling it Akamira.ai. And what it does is contains a lot of listings. But beyond that, I made them very search friendly. So through search boxes and filtering, one can look for certain sectors, certain geographic areas, and also they can be filtered by financial metrics. Whether it's revenue, EBITDA, asking price, the age of the business, number of employees, things like that. So yeah, so at the first level, I'm making them more discoverable by global investors. And at the second stage, I'm making it possible for them to, filter using different data. Yes. And then when it comes to execution, technology helps with the due diligence process and so forth.
So, what has been the response of the local SME markets to your initiative? What's the kind of reaction? Are they bullish about it? I mean, do you get that level of support? How is it?
Yeah, the reaction has been very good so far. And to be honest, I started this because I already knew people who had faced the succession problem. And they're now coming to me, saying, okay, we've got a business that we want to sell or find a successor for. And so within, this circle, the response has been very, very good. And of course, I'll keep expanding the pool of sellers. But I think people are very receptive to this idea.
Right. So, in terms, I mean, you did mention a couple of barriers in terms of lack of transparency, language. So, besides that, I mean, what other, challenges remain in terms of barriers today for international investors? And how do you see cross-border participation evolving over the next 3 to 5 years?
Beyond discovery, I think there are pragmatic questions like what happens to the operation of the SME? Who's going to manage it? Right. So I'm working on those solutions. In many cases, SMEs have a very solid senior management, and it's just the owner who wants to retire. In which case, the SME can remain in operation with the existing management, with perhaps oversight from the new owner. Um, so yeah, operation is one thing. And yeah, there are other issues, perhaps financing, also cultural fit is very important. It's is the new buyer actually interested in preserving what's good within the SME, or are they just trying to dismantle it or something? So yeah, so these are all very important factors.
You are also working through INV Japan, right? I mean, which is you've been working on educating the global investors. So, can you tell a little more about that? And what are the most common misconceptions that international investors have about Japan's private markets?
So INVJapan is the other business I run, and I created it because, again, to provide education to global investors. And I would say one misconception. Well, let's start with this. People tend to get sort of superficial ideas about Japan, right? And to take, there's one example. Many people are focusing on the IKEA phenomenon. And in case people haven't heard about it, IKEA is abandoned houses. So they tend to be very cheap. They can be purchased for next to nothing. So many foreign investors are interested in them. But once they come in, they realize that, it could be in the wrong location or it is in a very bad condition. So all you can do is demolish it and things like that. So similarly, I think, people tend to jump on the bandwagon when it comes to things without really considering all the factors. So yeah, what I'm trying to do is, provide all the relevant information.
Well, your career, I mean, as you mentioned in the beginning briefly, I mean, spans global financial institutions and international law firms. So, what kind of prompted you to move into entrepreneurship and focus on such a complex and structural issue in Japan?
I started out my career in international banking and law. But for the past decade or so, I've been working independently. And several years ago, I came across the succession problem and saw how severe it is. And I saw friends around me experiencing this succession issue. So I thought that something must be done about it. And, so it was born out of that. I decided that it was an issue to be tackled, but I could see solutions. So that's why I'm working on this right now.
So, I mean, in earlier one of your responses, you did mention about the culture aspect, and I believe Japan's SME markets, I mean, typically have been very male dominated. And even today, the private markets, mergers and acquisitions, financial infrastructure, these continue to be largely male-dominated sectors. So, what has been your experience, as a woman building in this space, particularly in Japan?
So I think you're very right. Whether it's the SMEs themselves or the whole M&A, industry, they tend to be male dominated historically. But I myself haven't experienced a lot of headwind. And I think, it's because I'm relying on a lot of my past experiences. So I think generally it's very important to establish credibility in the space. And I've also come to accept myself as kind of out of the box to begin with, right? So and yet I'm finding a lot of great people to work with. I've come across many SMEs that want to work with me and many investors who want to work with me. That's that's wonderful for me. Yeah.
So, do you see, going ahead, a greater role for diversity, including gender diversity, in shaping the future of Japan's private markets and succession landscape?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, diversity is very, very important. It really brings diverse perspectives to businesses and to society as a whole. And in Japan, we've seen a lot of this implemented with public companies, right? Both the Japanese government and stock exchanges are requiring, boards and executive levels to be much more diversely represented. And I think businesses of any size will benefit from diversity. So I really hope that this trend continues and that diversity, continues to be the key word for businesses all over Japan.
But do you see more women coming forward? Among the younger generation, because out of some of the conversations that I was having, I was given to understand that even today, when startup competitions are held in Japan, women-led startups are far and few. Sometimes there are none
Mm,
actually participating. So,
mhm.
in that kind of a scenario, how do you think that the whole uh, equation can kind of be changed?
In the startup world, there are very few female founders. And I think that's got to change over time. And it starts with visibility at the top, right? So, for example, the Sushi Tech event that you attended, I think it was very symbolic when both the Prime Minister of Japan and the Governor of Tokyo stood up on stage, and they were the main leaders representing the event. That's very significant. It sends a message, and I think it's important for women to represent venture capital and, kind of more mature startups. And that kind of visibility will encourage the younger women to say, "Oh, hey, I see these people doing it. That's very possible." So, I hope that encourages the younger generation to step up and take the risks and become founders.
In the current context, do you see any female leaders in the Japanese business landscape who may be willing to stick their neck out and basically be those poster girls for the new generation?
Yeah, I think that's happening already to a large extent. Um, for example, I'm a member of a group of female board members, and it's always encouraging to see that there are, they might be few and far between, but they do exist, and many of them are stepping up and trying to be role models and mentors for younger women. So it is happening slowly but surely, and I think change will definitely take place over time.
So, what would be your advice to women professionals looking to build careers at the intersection of finance, technology, and cross-border strategy, particularly in Japan?
I think it's important for women or any young person to kind of develop expertise in one thing or another, whether it's finance or technology, because having that competence builds up confidence, right? And once you have that confidence to go out there and try something new, you find many more opportunities. And I think it's important for people to remind themselves, don't limit yourself in any way. If there is something you're dreaming about, go ahead and research it and see how that can be attained. That would be my advice.
Right. So as Japan goes through this whole generational kind of transition, what would success look like over the next decade, both for the larger business ecosystem and for platforms like Akamira?
Yeah, so I think the idea of success is slowly but surely shifting. So, as you know, traditionally, Japanese people, both male and female, wanted to join large corporations and go up the corporate ladder. But I think, light is being shed on the startup world and things like that. So people now recognize that there are multiple paths. And, so hopefully they recognize that they can pursue any path that they want.
Wonderful. So, I mean, looks like you are quite bullish on the uh, Japanese market in the sense of the new generation and the whole excitement around startups coming out of Japan.
That's right. I mean, one's always got to be optimistic, right? So I tend to be very optimistic all the time. And, there are, structural barriers and things, but I think, with many similar minded people, you can chip away at these barriers. So that's the way I think.
Wonderful, Mika-san. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, it was a great pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much.